I took a break from Star Wars, and maybe you should too.
Why do you love Star Wars?
Oh, man. Yeah, this is a long one.
My dad loved Star Wars, and so my nickname growing up was Han. I was kind of like raised this way and never grew out of it.
It's my childhood. My dad introduced me, and it was there for me when I had COVID and pneumonia.
The connections between my family and my friends and the community that it's given me. My dad and I, we truly bond over Star Wars. I was in the womb. I think my mom was 6 months pregnant with me when the Phantom Menace came out, and I was in the theater. Little preborn me was jamming out to Duel of the Fates, and then I saw Attack of the Clones. That was one of the very first movies I'd ever seen in the theaters at 3 years old, and then I watched Revenge of the Sith with my dad in theaters.
It started as a kid. I grew up with the originals, got to see the re-releases in theater, and then grew up going to see the prequels.
Just the sci-fi goodness, lightsabers, galaxy far, far away, aliens and stuff.
It's the lived-in feel of the universe. It's the characters. It's the mythos.
It's the overall sense. Every universe has its own feel. Star Wars is a unique mixture of loyalty, friendship, danger, humor, all of that.
10-year-old me, so I'm dating myself, went to see Star Wars, never seen anything like it. When I was a kid, science fiction was kind of silly. Now, Star Wars is silly, but this was had an air of seriousness to it too, as well. Ever since then, I've loved it.
So it's a comfort. It's a comfort show, comfort movies, and I love the characters.
People, different storytellers can come in and tell different stories that they want to tell. And some can just be dumb fun, and others can be really deep and metaphorical and meaningful.
Honestly, what's made it stay is the community, like getting connected with other fans.
I think the deeper thing for me is the mythology of light versus dark, and the struggle of light versus dark in yourself, and then the struggle of light versus dark in the world around you. And I just think that message is so poignant and powerful and meaningful to me, and I think it planted seeds in me that I didn't realize were there until I became an adult. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the commonality that we all love Star Wars that brings us together, and I think it would be good for people to remember that.
Look, I'm recording this earlier, but the day this video releases will be the premiere of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. I'm going to say this a few times in this video, probably more than I can count, but I love Star Wars. I'm a huge nerd for a ton of different fandoms, but Star Wars feels different, and it has been for as long as I can remember. It's not a rare phenomenon that I grew up on Saturday morning cartoons and superhero movies like everyone else my age, but my relationship with Star Wars has always been different than those other fandoms. I can't photographically remember the actual first time I watched Star Wars. However, I do have memories of the first few times I did. As a kid, I had a ton of energy. I was also just giant compared to other kids my age. So wrangling young Will was a full-time job for my parents. Sorry, Mom, love you. But I was lucky enough to grow up with my grandparents close by. And on holidays, I'd get to run upstairs at my grandmother's house and putz around with the VCR. For context, I was born in 1996, so I'm officially about as old as the Star Wars special editions. And luckily, my grandparents had these. If my house was on fire and I could grab only one item out of the embarrassing amount of Star Wars stuff I have, I'd probably grab this because it's literally where my love for Star Wars started. I said earlier that my fandom for Star Wars felt different than everything else because until probably middle school, I didn't even know I was a Star Wars fan. If you're my age, you grew up at, in my opinion, the best time in history to be a Star Wars fan. The special editions rolled right into the return of Star Wars with The Phantom Menace. The toys were back. We had video games. Lego just started their partnership with Star Wars, which is a huge part of my fandom. Kids' meal toys, commercials, everything that you could buy. There was a version of it that had a Star Wars logo on it. George Lucas's capitalistic indoctrination of my youth was in full swing, and boy, did I eat it up. Like I said earlier, I didn't know I was a Star Wars fan. I thought everyone just loved Star Wars because it was everywhere. I didn't assume anything other than Star Wars was just a part of life. It was the norm, like going to school, or that thing of falling asleep after school at like 3 o'clock when the sun's still up. And then a few hours later, you wake up and you think that you've time traveled because it's dark out. Like a mosquito to a bug zapper, I sat in the baby seat of all those shopping carts with my eyes glued to anything that had that Star Wars logo on it. Part of what made the prequels so cool, or at least the time around the prequels, was that the focus was on episodes 1, 2, and 3, but the original trilogy was still being celebrated. Like, you could go to the store and find a Jango Fett action figure one peg over from a Millennium Falcon playset. It was cool. Then as I got older, I realized people didn't like the prequels. They considered them bad, not good, and stinky poo-poo time, as the New York Times would go to call it, which is the exact opposite of how I felt. I mean, how could someone not enjoy these movies? Now, after Revenge of the Sith, we didn't get a lot of movies during that time, during that gap, but we did get some of my favorite Star Wars media of all time, like The Force Unleashed, the Lego games, the Clone Wars, comics, toys, even parody media like Family Guy or Robot Chicken. Every year I got older, things would change, as is life, but Star Wars was always a concrete constant in my life. Fast forward to November 28th, 2014, and my mom calls me in from the other room and she says, "Hey, did you see that new Star Wars thing?" I assumed it was like a game announcement or something, so I got up and walked over and, oh, look, a stormtrooper without a helmet. Who's that little ball droid? That lightsaber has mini lightsabers? Oh my God, the Millennium Falcon. The Millennium Falcon is flying. Oh my God, it's the Millennium Falcon. Look, dude, even if the sequels aren't your favorite parts of Star Wars, you are absolutely lying to yourself if those first few trailers didn't just make your brain explode. I rewatched that trailer to edit this video and I still get teary-eyed. You could play Star Wars music in a DMV and I'd fold like a mom watching one of those videos on Facebook of a dog reuniting with their owner after a flood. John Williams, you bald, beautiful genius, I'd go to war for you. Now, I'm not going to harp on it too much, but my enjoyment for the 3 sequel films has varied since their release, and honestly still do. Luckily for the better. Those films grow with me and I appreciate them more as time passes. At Thanksgiving this past week, I got to see some family, and my wife has younger cousins that, just like every other adult in the room, know that I love Star Wars. These younglings are pretty much all under 10 years old. They weren't alive for the Star Wars releases that I got. When The Last Jedi hit theaters, they were the same age that I was when The Phantom Menace came out. They only know Star Wars as the sequels, Mandalorian, and some old movies about some guy named Anakin who also had a lightsaber but is also Darth Vader. And it's the coolest thing in the world when I get to talk to them about Star Wars and getting questions like, who was Obi-Wan's master? Or why was Yoda a ghost when he talked to Luke? And kind of like when I didn't really understand why people didn't dig on the prequels when I was their age, they don't know the difference. They don't know anything about people being mad on the internet about a character's age or Legends versus canon. All they know is Star Wars. Dude, I'm not a parent yet, but the kids were asking me questions and I don't really remember why, but I brought up the Clone Wars. And when I did, one of the kids was like, "What's that?" And I kid you not when I tell you, I felt just like Obi-Wan sitting across from Luke, about to tell him his father was a good friend. Dude, I couldn't have pulled my phone out faster. The first scene I showed them was Anakin and the 501st on the bridge on Urbana, and their eyes were the size of dinner plates. That's what Star Wars is all about. At the beginning of this video, I said that I took a break from Star Wars, and maybe you should too, because I believe that. It's no secret that a lot of people in the community were acting like an absolute
wretched hive of scum and villainy
when it came to the Acolyte. And let me say, if you didn't like the show, that's absolutely okay. I'll never tell you or another fan they're any less than because they didn't like something in Star Wars. But I will say, if you are taking that opinion and using it as a vehicle to be a moron, then you need to get your head checked. I liked The Acolyte. I enjoyed my time watching it. Is it my favorite Star Wars of all time? Not at all. Is it better than Return of the Jedi? No, dude. That's my favorite movie by a long shot. But that doesn't mean it's not fun to watch, and it definitely doesn't mean that gives me the power to go after other people who think differently, whether they liked it or not. I use Star Wars as an escape. I use it as a break from reality, as a stress reliever, and as a way to tap back into that magic my overgrown baby ass felt as a kid watching the Star Wars of my time for the first time. But after seeing the negative amount of sludge that was just piling up from week to week, my Star Wars experience was starting to, I guess, warp into this thing that I didn't know what it was. It was weird. I didn't enjoy it. I stopped checking my phone for updates for Star Wars news. I didn't want to make content or read comics or watch the movies. Stuff that I've loved for almost 30 years because, dude, I was bummed out. So I stepped away for a bit. I took a break, and it was truly the best thing I could have done. During that time, I was at home and watching TV, and Star Wars was on, and it was Luke, and he had just crashed on Dagobah. Oh, look, R2.
What? Ready for some power?
And literally just like that and every other time before it, I was stuck watching this magical, strange, fictional world that I've escaped to in my brain my entire life. And it was like nothing had changed. I started to sift through that bullshit of everything that was going on, and I got back to why I really loved Star Wars. I needed that break to realize why Star Wars is so important to me and so many other people. And honestly, I could not be happier that I did. Now, look, I don't want to preach at you. I'm not trying to be the Mace Windu to your Anakin Skywalker, but I know a lot of other people felt the exact same way that I did. And if you still feel that way, then maybe that will help you too. Today, we get new Star Wars. And will Skeleton Crew be the best new Star Wars of all time? I have no idea, but I'm excited to watch. And honestly, I would not be here today without Star Wars. And huge shout out to all of my friends and those other Star Wars creators and fans like you who are watching this who truly love Star Wars for reminding me why I love it too and why we're all sitting next to each other watching this big, beautiful thing come together and get new additions and new episodes and new movies, and why we all get so up in arms over it and why we're all so passionate about it because we all truly love it. And I truly love it. So thank you. And thank you, Star Wars. And be nice to people. Later, dudes.